This module's on autism spectrum disorders. So now when we look at the autism spectrum disorder, it's a big continuum. They used to have separate designations for autism and Asperger's syndrome, but now it's a very wide spectrum, which includes people with varying degrees of difficulty. Once it wasn't diagnosed as much, now it's more commonly diagnosed today, and it's much more common in boys than girls. So I found this great video that I wanted to share with you that I really think does a great job on helping you to understand what exactly autism is. So I'm going to stop now and let you watch this.
Hi everyone, my name is Paulina,
And I'm Tara,
and we're here to set the record straight about autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, because it's recently been a hot topic due to increasing classifications and identifications. As of 2010, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention reports as many as 1 in 150 children have ASD in the US. However, today, in 2016, it's now 1 in 68 children. Initially, there was a lot of confusion about ASD's conditions and causes. Even so, ASD research continues to have new findings.
ASD wasn't narrowly defined, and we mean that loosely because it's a spectrum disorder, until recently when the diagnosis was restricted to individuals with severe social and/or intellectual functioning. It is understood that ASD can range from mild to severe, as there is a wide degree of variation of how it affects a person.
In this video, we're going to talk about ASD's diagnostic information, contextual information, and strategies.
Time for our first section, which talks about all of the diagnostic information of ASD.
The federal definition of ASD in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA-04, is stated as a developmental disability significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction that adversely affects a child's educational performance. According to IDEA-04, ASD is evident when a child is 3 years old or younger. Some other characteristics of ASD include performing repetitive activities, stereotyped movements, resistance to daily routine, resistance to environmental changes, and unusual responses to sensory experiences. New Jersey defines ASD very similarly, almost verbatim, which shows the government and the state definitions are consistent with each other, and as such, agree to the conditions and characteristics of ASD.
The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or the DSM-5, is very specific as it mentions children with ASD show persistent deficits in social communication and interactions across multiple contexts. It describes the multiple contexts as having ranges of social-emotional reciprocity, nonverbal communicative behaviors, maintaining and understanding relationships, repetitive and restrictive behaviors, stereotype movements, rigid thinking, and hyperactivity or hypoactivity to sensory input. This DSM-5 describes these symptoms must be present during the child's early development period.
So for our next section, we're going to go into contextual information.
Children with ASD are described as being on the spectrum, but what does that mean? In layman's terms, the spectrum varies from very high to very low levels of emotional, social, and cognitive functioning. So, at the high end of the spectrum, the signs and symptoms of ASD are mild. In fact, people with high-functioning autism usually have average to above average intelligence and communication skills. Levels of functioning can be so high that outside people are unaware of a person even having ASD.
On the other end of the spectrum, children with low-functioning ASD have severe signs and symptoms, which of course reflects their intelligence and communication skills. Students with low-functioning ASD are more likely to be challenged mentally, have epilepsy, and have limited expressive and receptive language. Children with ASD who are verbal may say words or phrases that do not have any meaning or are out of context. They may repeat words they heard at an earlier time. Additionally, some children with ASD may speak in a high-pitched, sing-song, or robot-like voice.
Milestones are important for parents and physicians to monitor a baby's development, learning, and behaviors. Parents are usually the first to notice their child is not meeting these important milestones because they are typically missed during the baby's development. There are no medical tests for ASD, therefore trained physicians and psychologists must administer autism-specific behavior evaluations. Parents may notice that their child does not make eye contact, respond to his name, or that he plays with his toys in an unusual or repetitive manner.
Like we've mentioned, ASD is a spectrum disorder, so cognitive skills of children with ASD vary greatly. The more severe the ASD is, the more a child's cognitive skills and development are affected. Regardless of where a child is on the spectrum, it is typical for children with ASD to have unevenly developed cognitive skills, where verbal skills are weaker than nonverbal skills. They usually perform better in tasks consisting of immediate memory and visual skills, and have a tough time with tasks consisting of symbolism and abstract thinking.
ASD affects the lower brain, which is responsible for balance and coordination. Therefore, children with ASD often face physical development delays. They also have low muscle tone and affected fine and gross motor skills. As such, it makes smooth changes and transitions from one movement to another very difficult for children with ASD.
Children with ASD are mostly affected across social and emotional characteristics. They oftentimes find it hard to recognize facial expressions and emotions, use emotional expressions, copy expressions, understand and control their own emotions, and understand and interpret others' emotions. They develop slower emotional responses.
Because of their social and emotional deficits, children with ASD find it hard to use their emotions and manage social situations to the point where they might display a lack of concern or misread social situations. Children and adults with ASD sometimes scan faces more than typical developers do, spend less time looking at people in the eyes, and spend more time looking at people's mouths. It's not that every individual doesn't want to relate with people, it's just that they could simply be lacking the skills to develop peer relationships.
Common social deficits include the ability to open and conclude conversations, initiating peer interaction, joining peers while playing, decoding facial and body language, observing and mimicking appropriate social behavior, and predicting and understanding peers' emotions. It is possible for parents and specialists to teach social skills such that the deficit margin will not be substantial for some children with ASD. However, for others, the social sense may never be fully achieved.
Every child on the spectrum presents unique abilities, symptoms, and challenges. Here are some of their strengths and weaknesses, which all depend on where the child is placed on the spectrum.
Social skills and unwritten rules of social interaction, speech and language problems, restrictive activities and interests, sensory activity and the need for sensory escape, resistance to change, inability to recognize deception and comply with social norms, perceiving emotional state, grasping the big picture, and motivation in areas that are not points of interest.
Conceptual skills to model complex situations, logical thinkers, exceptional memories, attention to minute detail, laser focus, encyclopedic knowledge in areas of interest, independent thinkers, and visual processing.
Okay, time for our last section where we